Hey, this is Wes Bailey at Wes Bailey Attorney at Law. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and I believe we're on X and all those good social medias. Either way it goes, we wanted to get with everyone on this channel to start talking about successions, today is about successions. Generally, it's going to be about any kind of law that we practice at our law firm. So when we're talking about successions today in Louisiana, specifically Louisiana, I'm not barred in any other state, so I can't speak to what they do, but what I can speak to is Louisiana. And successions are a big deal here because, first and foremost, you got to know what you're dealing with. Do you have an estate to actually even deal with in a succession? Some people don't have much when they do pass, and some people have a lot. So you kind of have to know what you're dealing with. First thing we always send out to our clients is something called a questionnaire. It's pretty intensive, and it goes through an extraordinary amount of law and property that people have. The reason why is because whenever you have a deceased party in your family, or let's say it's a relative or not a relative, maybe it's someone who left you something in a will, you want to know what they had, and you want to know how much of they had. Did they have debt on that thing? Maybe they gave you a car, but did they also leave a finance agreement with a finance company? You don't know. So it's really, really important that you kind of explore that, and that's what kind of a good questionnaire that we send out to our clients does. Is there stocks, bonds, IRAs, retirement accounts? Is there bills that have to be paid, such as medical bills? A lot of people get caught up in family members who run a lot of debt up, sadly, before they pass on. So you might have someone who is dying of a terminal disease, and you may not know that on the side these people are spending. They've taken out credit cards and you didn't know about them. You might be a wife, you might be a husband, you might be a relative. If they leave you something, you have to watch out in Louisiana because you may get hit with that debt as well. And if you don't know it and you go and proceed with a succession, you may not have proceeded with that succession without dealing with that debt first. So first and foremost, you got to know what you're dealing with in a succession. That's why any attorney should always send out a questionnaire. And we do that a number of times, and we do it digitally as well with people, or some people like paper, but in the digital age on a computer, it's easier for people to work on it at home or work on it from wherever they're at on their phone or tablet. It kind of helps with the digital workforce. So there's that questionnaire. That's how we kind of start out a succession. Secondly, on a succession, you got to have a death certificate when you're dealing with any kind of succession. You got to know who's the decedent, who's deceased. And that's a pretty tough thing because in Louisiana, you get only so many of those that are certified, and you also only get so many of those things that are really, really certified, such as death certificates. You can get them. It's just you can get more of them, but going through the administrative process is a long and tedious process. And let's just kind of be real. Who wants to get more of a death certificate of their family member that they love? It's just a tough reminder. So those are two of the really, really important key issues when you're dealing with a succession. Now, I can go on about other things. I can go on about relatives and family trees and things of that nature. But if you're starting a succession, those are two very key issues that you want. The next is knowing, hey, is there a will? And if there is a will, what kind of will is it? We talked about that really briefly in some of my earlier videos, but to talk about it in a really long range here, there's two types, which are notarial and holographic wills. And I say those very slowly because most people have never heard them. And it's the first time you probably are hearing it whenever you have someone who's deceased. A notarial will is one that is done under the hand of a notary. It has what we call in Louisiana an authentic act. It's done with witnesses, it's done with a notary, and the person that is writing that will or has put down in black and white what they want and is signing it has done it, and they've signed this will on the prescribed manner in Louisiana law. An attorney needs to go through that will with you. If I'm that attorney, I go through the wills. I look through them to make sure that they are the proper will to actually put on paper. Okay, so you don't want to just kind of fling that around. That is a very important document. If you are seeing different attorneys, make sure you get that original back before you move on to the next one. Okay, but in Louisiana, that original, ultimately when it's filed, it will have to be filed with the clerk of court. The other type of original is an holographic will. And holographic wills are literally written by the hand of the actual person making the will. It can be me, such as Wes Bailey, let's say, Wes Bailey to my wife, all of my possessions under my own hand, signed in my own handwriting, dated. Those are handwritten holographic wills. I kind of use that the quotation because nobody ever uses that word. Nobody ever hears that word unless you talk to an attorney. And it's a great, great bar question because who's going to remember that? So those are the two types of wills you'll use, but do you even know that they exist? So that's a pretty important question if you have a loved one to ask, or a relative or a partner or a friend or whoever. Second type of succession that we deal with is intestate, which is you found out that there is no will, that there is no holographic will, testate will, nothing like that that's going on. So, okay. So when that doesn't happen, perfect. You know that if it doesn't, you can move to the next step, which is intestate, and you can work that angle in the code of doing the succession without having to go through that property. Now, when you go through that process, one after the other, the code is going to have a prescribed manner in which property is divided. The most common is generally husband, wife. The wife passes, let's say the husband comes in and wants to do a succession on the wife, or vice versa, wife wants to do a succession on the father. The law has a way, and Louisiana Code has a way of dealing with that. Each family is extraordinarily different because you have now divorced families, you have married families that have been married for 20, 30, 50 years. And then you also have half brothers, half sisters, and family members outside of the marriage as well. There's all kinds of ranges of relatives and family members that you have to learn to kind of deal with in life, but also you have to kind of expect. Succession law is tricky like that. You need to make sure that you talk to the attorney or an attorney or me or anyone about what the family situation is like, okay? So that's the two types of succession that you got going on. In another part of our videos, we talked about administration. So if you have an estate, which I keep on referring to an estate, but what an estate is the things in the decedent's life. So you have someone who's passed away, all of the things that they have in their collection of things, such as home, property, valuables, goods. We call them movables, which are things that can be moved, such as cars or jewelry or watches, whatever, versus immovables. So you think of land, things that are immovable. When you have those types of things, those things are what you call an estate. The whole idea and concept of someone's property. Well, they've passed, so they can't be alive and transfer this stuff to you. So the law has to say, okay, since they've passed and they're dead, this is the prescribed method of how we're going to transfer that property. Normally they would do that through deeds. Normally they would do that through donations if they're alive. But the law says now that they've passed, we've got this other prescribed method. So very important to kind of remember that the estate, all those things